is Shanae and Alejandro Brati from the Believe in Yourself, Believe in Your Business TV show, and we welcome you to the Spanglish World Network. And you can watch us out on Stingo TV channel 250 and 251. You can go to the respective app stores and download the app. And while you download it, you can rate and leave a comment. The app is free, and you can also see it on Amazon Fire and Fire Sticks and Roku Sticks, and on all smart TV devices 2016 forward. And we welcome Nicole today. Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure. How are you, Alejandro?
I am really, really good today. Happy that we are going to have Nicole that is going to be teaching us a lot of the stuff that she's doing. This is great. I We are going to start, Nicole, with what you are doing right now, and then we are going to go back to your life and your history and all the story of the thing that you how you started to believe in yourself. But tell us a little bit of what are you doing and how you are changing the world right now.
Yeah, sure thing. I've been doing really well. I'm actually in New York City. I'm actually speaking out of a venture capital firm today, so I'd actually love to show you like my office. I have
Nice.
That's
all of my space
awesome.
for free for right now, and no one's here, so it's really nice to have an office like this. But other than that, what I'm working on is actually Etha, ETHA.one, not .com, but .one. And basically, what it does is that it's a new social and a news media combined into one platform that allows people to hold politicians accountable. What we're technically building here, and what the technical term is, it's called an algocracy. What an algocracy is that it's a government by algorithm that will actually be using AI and also wisdom of the crowds, a lot of people's opinions, in order to help speedy processes for policy and lawmaking based on how everyone is feeling about a certain topic or position, and have an issue by issue breakdown of where voters stand and why, all across the US and eventually the world.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah.
It's a giant project, I guess you can say, but one part of it is that we're trying to cleanse the misinformation. That will take quite a bit of time to develop. I'd say about 3 years in totality, where our AI will have a 95% accuracy rate to help discredit some of those untruthful or over exaggerated stories. But on the other side is the political side, right? We're starting with political information, just because a lot of people are obviously emotionally aware and care about wherever they're currently at for policy and lawmaking. But as I know and as I've seen, not just in the U.S. but across the world, that it's very difficult to escalate a particular policy or law to any politician and to even hold them accountable. So that's what we wanted to do, is have a report card for these politicians, and every time they do promise something, that the public would be able to show, hey, they actually did do this. If they didn't, and they didn't promise enough or too little, then it could affect their scores negatively. So they're going to have to campaign even harder and promise more the next time around. I find this a very fair system because this does not exist currently.
Mm.
Mm.
That is
Yeah,
really
that.
cool, and I believe we need to be going deeply on this. Shanae, do you have any comment on this?
No, I was just about to say that's awesome. We really need it here in South Africa.
That's
I'm
awesome. I've
hearing
been in
many.
South Africa before, and that's really cool to see somebody from there. Yeah, it's pretty crazy everywhere.
You're welcome to come back.
I'm dying to come back. It's awesome.
So let's go back to your life now, and we are going to go deeper with what you are doing in ITA, because I believe it's, as you are saying, it's a big project, a big dream. It's something that is really needed, but at the same time, there is a lot of forces against this. So it's going to be very interesting to know what are your thoughts on this, on how are you dealing with the forces that are against this clarity and all these things. How are you dealing with them? But first, let's start with Nicole. Who is Nicole? Where are you coming from? Who you were before you believe in yourself? and how that developed to have this amazing project right now.
Yeah. So a couple of things that actually went into, my background in order to create Etha. But I guess I could start from day one. I was born in Chicago. I've lived around the US. I've been in California, Florida, Texas, as well as New York City. My background is actually in sales. I graduated in communication sciences and disorders, so linguistics and the way that people speak and all those disorders around them. When I got into sales in the professional world, I got into technical sales, so software and IT. I got to learn a lot about technology just from how it's operating and also all the needs within these larger enterprises and corporations. And then after that, I moved to systems engineering and deployment consulting. I know that's a mouthful. So basically, what I did is I helped implement large systems in government, education, universities. And then I went to Warner Bros. After that to work on the communication systems engineering side. Through, I guess, all of that experience to the professional world, I definitely got a very great understanding of business in general, but also the experience behind systems engineering and all of the issues that the government, education, as well as communications face. But a huge portion to another part of my story, there's two more. South Africa is actually one of them. So right after graduation, I went to South Africa, and what we were doing there for our school was actually working in Khayelitsha. And I know Shanae must be thinking like, oh my gosh, Khayelitsha. It's a pretty dangerous place, but what we were doing there is that we were helping disadvantaged entrepreneurs, people that didn't have food, water, or shelter, that had businesses on the side, help them scale and grow without any money involved. So these were some of our projects, and a lot of my perceptions about culture and lifestyle have changed when I went to South Africa. And I couldn't owe it more than that to those people and all the places that I've traveled to show me all of these things and what we might take for granted here in the US. And it was a really big shocker to see all of these people in South Africa that didn't have anything, but they're still running full business on the side. And it really shows just their will to survive and, help their family just through difficult issues that they've come to face with in the last couple of decades. But then my last and final story, this one is a little crazy. It has to do with COVID, of course, but after my job at Warner Bros., I lost my dream job there. And I was only there for a couple of months. And I also had a startup at the same time. The startup was with a colleague of mine, and we created jet bridges. And long story short, we had a very large contract coming up, and we lost the startup because of the industry that it was in and my job. Naturally, most people would probably be like, oh man, I don't know what to do. So I ended up, having a mental breakdown, of course. In the meantime, I didn't have my phone on me because I just kind of chucked it out of the window. But long story short, I ended up taking a journey with my car from California back to Florida. I went to a desert and I got stuck in this desert. I got stranded because my car got stuck on a rock. Police officers found me about 10 hours later, and I was deserted in the smallest town ever in the United States. It was somewhere in Nevada. And after all of this happened, I ended up doing the unthinkable, which was hitchhiking with truck drivers across the country back home. And during this time, I saw a huge perception change of people that were thinking about COVID and information and all of these other things that kind of came together during that time. I really saw how big of an issue that misinformation was and the impact that COVID had on all of us, just because none of us had clear insight or factual information to how to fight this disease properly. And I thought that, throughout my whole time there, I also got to meet a lot of different people from all over the United States during that time. And that's kind of where the basis of my ideas all kind of came together. I'd say it's a huge mixture of my professional and personal experiences through those journeys that I've mentioned. But on the other hand, I also have been deeply affected by politics, like most people in the US and the world, just because, most people in the US, I don't know if it's the same for Mexico or South Africa, but I know a lot of people are very polarized and have very separate ideologies which creates a very, very difficult problem for all of us in terms of democracy and solving things to get better in policy and lawmaking.
Wow. And if you think, okay, let's go deeper in that area when you get lost in Las Vegas and like moving, like how you started to believe that to believe in yourself, like I can get here and not happen something wrong or whatever. And how was that process inside of you to really think like it's okay, I can learn and I can do all these things, and you were even open to learn instead of like being afraid of what can happen here with the strangers and these type of things. How was that process?
It was pretty scary when I was in the middle of this whole journey. I would say that, like, during that time, I didn't feel afraid just because I was more trying to survive rather than anything else. And I was, like, really trying to scramble and make sure that my intuition was telling me that, hey, maybe these people are good. Maybe I should trust them because they're actually trying to extend a hand and help. During this time, anything could have happened. I could have died. I didn't have a weapon on me. I didn't have a phone on me, and I was in the middle of nowhere. So being able to be extremely resourceful with people that you're talking with, and also being really smart about in terms of who you might be accepting into your area whenever you're in a situation like this. It's all about being very creative to get yourself out of something like this. I did take a lot of missteps. I did make a lot of mistakes during this journey. That whole journey actually did take 4 weeks in the United States to accomplish. And this is not like some stunt that I've pulled either. This was just out of survival. How am I going to get back home when everything is shut out, right? It taught me a little bit about strategy too in business in a very interesting way, because it makes you go outside of your values and your actual comfortable zones in order to take a risk to get back home. And in my case, it's very, very dangerous. Similarly to a startup, you have to give up a lot of things and sacrifice a lot of things. And during this time, I was like, if I can survive this, I can definitely make sure my company survives, just because of the pressure that I've been put through. And that kind of naturally helps me with like the pressure behind building a company and a startup.
Sinead?
So, so how do you see? Can you give me an example of how this journey has helped you through the startup phase?
Sure. I would say, like, it comes a lot to do with like communication, right? This kind of helped me really realize a couple of things. Misinformation is a really big issue, right? Just because of the way that I was talking with people, I didn't rely on my phone or social media or news media to actually talk to them. I spoke with them face to face, and no one really knew who I was because I didn't have anything on me. So they were just basically helping me trust into the process that I will get home. And I'd say, like, during this journey too, is like when you're in the middle of trying to survive in something like this, you really just try to keep pushing forward as much as possible, keep failing faster and faster so that you can find a way home. And in this case, my company is my home, right? I'd say, like, you have to take a lot of risks, right? And I'd say, like, that opened my eyes up. Is like, I don't know anyone with a story like mine that took these risks by accident and ended up pulling through just because they had the confidence within themselves to survive and also to sustain something in order to get back home. So I'd say, like, a lot of my personal experiences, even with South Africa, I really take those and put them into my daily business objectives of how to be able to survive. How can we be creative? How can you actually confidently share your fears, but also all the other exciting things with your team in order to be creative enough to solve these real world issues of, one, how to make a company survive, and then all of these other things that just kind of really come under this journey. I'd say the risk was the biggest thing, right? A lot of people probably won't go through what I went through in that case. There's a lot of other things that people do go through that are way worse than what I've been through. But at the end of the day, it's all about perseverance and having the confidence to see the end of the light of the tunnel, to get your point across and to get back home safely and to survive.
Wow. And then when you got back home, how did you feel, and how did you decide to like start a business after what you've been through?
Yeah, I'd say when I got home, I was probably demolished mentally and physically just because of the actual journey itself. Probably walking a lot of miles as well. I'd say about 150 in total just to get
Wow.
certain places because there was no Ubers, no planes, trains, cars, nothing. I either had to rely on people or walk. It's like one of those things. When I got home, obviously, I slept for many days. And my parents were just obviously worried about my mental health, and they were just, checking in on me. I started doing like getting back to normal after 2 or 3 weeks of just the pain of like the stuff that I've been through prior to that. But I'd also say it was able to help me like, you know, I had a lot of time on my hands. It was COVID. I was
Mm.
probably not going to have a job in the meantime because no one was hiring at that point, right?
Yeah.
Everything was remote, everything was up in the air. So I didn't decide to put any of my time into finding a job or recruiting. I stayed with
Mm.
my parents for 7 or 8 months and I just started doing a lot of deep research. I knew about what algocracies were in 2018 during a conference. I've always wanted my own startup. And then after I lost my startup with my friend, I was like, I should really try to do something by myself. Because I
Mm.
was like, again, if I could survive something like this, then business should be pretty easy after something like that,
Yeah.
It gives you a lot of tough skin, thick skin, and it's like, come at me now. Like, I'm not really afraid of anything. So it's just being able to go through experiences like that give you that fearlessness or that edge against all of either your competitors or some of the venture capitalists or people that you're speaking to. It gives you a lot of natural intuition and insights through experiences like that.
And how did you deal? Because at the end, it's like a roller coaster. Like you are feeling like this is amazing. I am doing the trip of my life, and the next minute you can be thinking like what I am doing, how I am here, why I ended up here. So how did you deal with that roller coaster? And maybe in the survival mode, but at the end, even in survival, you are sometimes of thinking like what is happening here, what why I am doing this, or even in those long walks trying to understand what you were doing.
Yeah. I mean, kind of like sharks, if you stop swimming, you'll die, right? So that's what my mindset was going into it. Like, if I don't learn or walk or keep going, I will probably end up somewhere on the side of the road. I think
Mm.
that's also where a lot of people give up halfway is that they don't either have enough fearlessness or confidence or experience or the mindset specifically. The mindset is key here, right? If you can continue to tell yourself everything's going to be okay, I'm going to push forward, most often than not, you're already 50% already on the way there. It's all about mindset. The rest is about really, really survival tactics. But I'd say like being able to have that behind you and have that fearlessness is what helped me accomplish some of those things, Alejandro. So I don't know. Does that answer your question or?
No, it's part of that, yeah. And another question that I have with that, because you were saying that where you were there and doing that, you started to realize that there was a lot of misinformation with this. So one thing that I have learned is a lot of the when I am ready to receive something, I am open to receive it. And sometimes you can be telling me something and I am not listening to that. And I am like, it was a good conversation with Nicole and that's it. But in other moments I can be like, wow, this is amazing. And you're telling me the same thing that you were telling me 2 weeks ago, and right now I am ready. So when you are ready to listen to this is because something started to happen in your life about this misinformation. So if you start to think about that, even from the past, not exactly in this moment, where do you believe started this feeling of there is a lot of misinformation in the world, and I want to help on this?
Yeah. I've never been a very big observer of the news to even begin with, just because I've seen the impact of how it was on my family. My family is immigrants, are immigrants in the United States. I was born in the US. But, the way that they're very, very scared, right, in our country. And they just generally look at TV and news all day, especially when you're in very, very remote areas and you don't have a lot of human interaction or not very many people around you. What you do have to feel connected is, in fact, TV and social media. So then I was like, I see how it affects my family. And then I've taken personal trips to third world countries on purpose. I've been to, South Africa, Mexico, Colombia, India. I've seen all these different cultures. Everyone has the same exact issue. A lot of people are inside, a lot of people are afraid because of the way that there's fear in our news media to keep us in shelter at home, more comfortable. At least this is the way that the
Yeah.
news is designed in the US. But I'd say, like, when I saw the comparison of what it's actually like to travel and meet people in person and see the perception change and the depth and all these different types of people and walks of life, I really compared it to the media, and I was like, this is nowhere near what I see when I travel. I don't travel like a normal person either. So I do tend to take a little bit of risk taking whenever it comes to meeting people in different very scary areas as well. So I'd say, like, when you do meet people face to face, it is a very different story, a very different perception than what is perceived in the media, which makes me think that either the media is having a very hard time showing the perceptions of these different cultures, people's places, or they're just focusing on very scare tactics that is not going to be good for all of us in the future. And this could cause a lot of issues, right? A lot of people that are scared, they actually act out based on their fear rather than actual logic, right?
Yeah.
So this causes a huge chain reaction in terms of lies and effects in the media, which is all really comes down to perception and exposure of different cultures and stories out there, that I wanted to kind of combine that and show a better perspective of the world, not just the ugly, not just the bad, but also the good side, and also the stories that are really critical for a lot of people to hear that are not being projected into normal news media today. And the way that you can do that and kind of escape, not being able to project some of these stories is actually, you don't have to be a news broadcaster, because social medias in the United States actually have this law. I don't remember what the not law of the name was, but I think it says something that social medias are allowed to govern their platforms any way they deem fit on the internet, which means you can basically post any different type of video and anything else on social media. Now, this also presents a problem where there's this law called Sarbanes-Oxley. What damaged Facebook's reputation is, after they went public, the government got deeply involved. And that's why some of these chain reactions from the main system that they've built have actually caused the problems in terms of banning people, suppressing, voices, being banned in certain countries just because of the way that things are set up. What we're trying to do is actually work with governments, work with people, and everything all kind of combine into one roof to really truly understand the perceptions, the things that we're allowed to project in the media that have not been successfully done so, all of the other laws, and keep our company as private as possible. So that way we have more reign of how to control or how not to control our users, but also share different perspectives of the world as well. Because this is very key in terms of misinformation, to also help assist with having a clean environment so that we can discuss things like politics, as complex as they are, to break them down and to educate people instead of doing whatever we're scaring people, in the media. That's not the way it should be. And a lot of these politicians, the government, don't realize how badly some of the laws and policies have tangled them to where they can't reverse some of these laws. And this is where Etha is really trying to help with misinformation, is first cleanse everything and then be able to better solve for policy and lawmaking when everyone is on the same page. That is the whole point.
Hmm. And
And
if go ahead, Shai.
how welcoming are the governments with this app of yours?
So far, we've only been involved with the United States government. I know that if we go to other governments, it's not going to be as easy. That's why we, of course, want to implement it here in the US first to really be able to
Mhm.
understand how we're able to help the rest of the world with this technology. Usually, if something really big happens in the United States and it works, it usually will work towards the rest of the world, right? I do understand like places like Venezuela, even South Africa might reject things like this because it's a huge shift, right? But once people are going to start talking about it and knowing about this technology, what my goal is if the government won't work with us, I'll release all of the technology and the code to the whole world so that they could replicate and copy it any which way they'd like. It's almost going to help be unescapable for some people and some leaders. And this is the whole premise. I may be hiding under a cave my whole life after this goes live like that, but I don't mind. And it's just like it's all about the technology that we've been able to create based on our personal experiences to deliver it to the rest of the world. Europe has actually been pretty open for this because they are one of the change makers and leaders in data and privacy laws. And we're actually preferring to work with them and the US government and Canada first to understand a good structure of data and privacy laws before we implement and collect that stuff to begin with. So that way we keep our users later, we keep a long-standing system, but we also make everyone happy like unlike before because a lot of these social medias and things didn't exist back then and there was no laws, right? Our
Yeah.
understanding is that we need to understand the government, the way that it works in any country first, understand the data and privacy laws, and then work around it to a system that would be able to help integrate with the current existing system, if not completely replace it or make it even better. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Thanks for
I'm a
clarifying.
little afraid of obviously bringing this to the Middle East and Africa, but these countries are extremely disadvantaged in those spaces, and this is something that I've actually wanted to bring to them. I know there's going to be a lot of negotiations, but the way that the system is set up, if they don't want to take it, I'll just take it to Mars and to Elon, but we'll show how all of this stuff is actually working correctly for the future.
And tell us a little bit about those, even because I know that even in the States and everywhere, there is a lot of people that is pushing back, like, okay, I don't want, I want the status quo right now, how it is. I know it, I know how it works, I know we are doing different things. I am not going to say exactly what, but uh, tell me how is it going with you, like dealing with those type of things, and how are you dealing with them?
Yeah, so in terms of pushback, I think this would be a huge application for the government. So they'd actually be wanting this, right? This is something that helps refactor and redo the whole system from the ground up. Like, this is something that is going to need heavy input with them eventually, maybe not right now, but eventually that these governments are going to have to get deeply involved because this will shift and change the way that our laws and policies are made. Politicians, we've gotten pretty interesting people that know about us now. Stacey Abrams, Andrew Young, Brian Kemp, they're all politicians out of Georgia State. But we also, have been speaking with correspondents that know Mitt Romney about our product. So far, what we've heard from these politicians in the US is that they think this would be extremely beneficial because they don't understand anyone, and all the data that they're being provided is misinformation usually, or extremely deconstructive. In terms of like regular people that we've been speaking to, Republicans and Democrats in the United States, for those that are familiar, um, I've been on calls with extreme Republicans and extreme liberals all at the same time. At the very beginning, obviously, it's very tense, but I'd love to facilitate conversation and deeply understand both sides and then try to connect the dots as to why there's so many issues with the way people are thinking, right? And this actually helped me turn into a call that could have been disastrous, but I actually got these two extremist sides to start talking to one another. And that's like what my main goal is just to really understand why it is the way that it is. But so far, we're not going to try to focus on extreme political parties or people right now, just because one, they can cause a huge riff and will get banned off of AWS servers. Our competitors like Parler and Getter have actually been banned because they could not control the extremist behaviors, patterns, terrorists, all these other different things on these websites. And this is what actually we're trying to prevent and grow a little bit slower by creating a community that's more engaging, by creating a community that's more constructive. Even if you're deconstructive, you won't get banned, but you won't get access to the people's profiles, right? Like you'll still get to see all the information and read it, but you're not going to get banned off the platform. You're not going to gain any points or gain anything out of it. So you're just going to be basically talking to yourself on the app. Other than that, I would say we're more focused on people that understand polarization, which there's a lot of us. Even any side that I've been able to talk to, except for the extreme, right? Probably 10, 20% of those people will never be able to understand this, and that's okay. It's not what we're focusing on. We want to focus on people that care, and people that understand polarization and the problems within the media. There is quite a bit of us. In terms of the ones that deeply understand it, I would also say it's about 20%. And everyone else in the middle, that's also our perfect target client. These are libertarians, people that are slightly left-leaning, slightly right-leaning, right? They could be centrists, completely down the center. I don't agree with either side. They could be independents. They could be undecided voters, people with no political stance because they just don't trust our system. They don't trust the media. These people would be the most ultimate types of users for our platform, in addition to people that are still a little bit open and left or right, that are willing to try to understand the other side. So these are the kind of people that we will be focusing on for quite some time before we get those extremist people. But by that time, hopefully we'll be able to change perceptions of some of these extremist behaviors for that.
And that's exactly the title of today's session, that is change your perception and know that you can do everything. So I can get a good guess of why you are saying that. Tell me about more about that. What you have learned about perceptions, how that has can create a very bad world or a very good world after you change that perception. And what are the examples that you can see? I know that you have been telling a lot of examples during today's session, but learning about that also helps a lot to understand that.
Yeah, sure. I'm very big on education. I worked on education and university systems. I would say that if you can fix all of these issues within education first, you can fix anything else in the world, right?
Mm.
Because if you restructure the way that people learn, which a lot of people aren't going to traditional universities or schools now. It's a trend, right? People are learning and reading more than ever because of social media, the news, everything else on the web. So this is a natural learning place, right? And I wanted to be able to eventually, so we solved the misinformation, we solved the whole political thing. The next step would be to educate our users as deeply as possible, but make it into a really fun game. Like, hey, I'm the most politically aware, and I can say that because I read everything, right? And I commented, and everyone likes what I'm saying because it all makes sense, right? I would say that's a really big piece to this, is like educating our users eventually so that they could know about these complex topics before they start talking about like they know everything, right? So this is a really big piece. And Alejandro, what was the second part to that?
The second part that I would love to know is how well, but it's a little bit different from this part, but that you are talking about. For me, this is a very amazing dream, great. But how you are securing that you are not converting yourself to a company that has another type of perception that is different from others, but at the end it's another perception, and that is trying to be really as real as possible.
Yeah, it's actually the proof that we'll be able to provide to everyone that will be on the platform. A lot of these things are usually internal to companies that we'll never be able to see. But if people want to download a report, they want to download their data, other people's data, obviously for a price. and not misuse it. They have to sign policies and things. All of these things eventually will help come down to perception, right? If you can really get people to understand, hey, I can compare against Fox News and CNN, and then get to see what is actually happening in that community, people will naturally start changing their perception. Because if they're always 24/7 on the TV, and then the TV starts over time showing a little bit of different stories and help transforming it that way, it'll naturally help them occur to that. But yes, like education is one of the biggest things for me in terms of implementation to our systems that'll eventually help people understand, not just fight about things that are currently in the news media today. I would also say, like, another really big piece to this in terms of perception change, exposure is a huge issue, right? A lot of people, like, let's say that live in Alaska or in the middle of nowhere and somewhere in the Arctic Circle, are probably not going to get to see a lot of people, cultures, and things, right? And what they're doing is watching TV the whole time, right? So if they only see what's on TV and they only see people of color on TV with whatever the TV is saying, whether it's a lack of education or with education, I would say that's a really big perception change. That's a huge, huge portion of, how people may be able to perceive other things in the future. So, like, let's say I'm going to go back to a political example just because of what we're doing. Let's say you go to a rally for your favorite politician, right? And you get to see, oh, hey, I compared this with Fox and I compared this with CNN. You have all of its bias checkers, but then you see all of the people on Etha's app that will eventually be able to put all of those videos end to end of what actually happened at that event. People will get to see, hey, Trump didn't really say that, or Biden didn't really say this, right? This is what they said. And people, instead of arguing about the extreme spin on these stories, they'll be arguing about, hey, how do we actually solve what this politician is trying to say? How do we take it into our own hands if the politician doesn't care, right? How do we solve this as a community up to a national level eventually that involves a lot with perception and education for our users in the future? But also, like, how are you going to be able to break those perceptions? And that's being able to show the proof in the media. Our AI will be at 95% accuracy rate in a few short years. But when it is ready, it'll actually be able to show you the first time an origination statement came from. So that means, let's say I love you for the first time ever on the social media, and I'm a super celebrity, right? We'll be able to verify, even if you're on the dark web, even if you're using a VPN, all of these other crazy things that one of my co-founders is an absolute genius of how to do all of this stuff. And he shows me how scary it can be. But we've been able to see and track people exactly where it's coming from. So, like, let's say if I didn't say I love you, but some news media reported that I did say something like that, they're going to get a bad score because they misrepresented what I was saying, or I did not even say. So that's fake news, right? Eventually, you'll be able to see the proof. So, like, let's start with the main headline story. This AI will be able to show you the whole string all the way to the first time that originated from. Like, hey, this fake celebrity death came from some 4 a.m. prankster blogger. Are you sure you want to read this article? Because this isn't real, right? And similarly, too, is, like, I'd say once people get to see that, we could also start breaking down the narratives, the extreme behaviors and patterns in the news media that show the exaggeration and the fake news and all of this other stuff that is around it.
That, for me, that is very interesting. Something that I have found a lot in this area specifically, and I am not saying that it's the case for everything, but if there is some people that is like, I have some friends that they are like, I know that the media is telling me half of the thing that they are telling is wrong, but I want to listen to that, and I feel that I have the answer, or the mind to understand that this is good or this is bad, or how I can. And they like to see news for a long time and try to, from all the things that they are listening, try to create their own critic, what they want. But the reality is that at the end they are so immersed that they are like feeling even anxious and feeling with a lot of issues. So how what are you thinking about that anxiousness and all these things that happens when people is looking for news, and if you are looking to change that also, or that is something that is more difficult, or what are you thinking about that?
Yeah, I would say it will take a very long time. Let's say it's 50%, right? We're going to focus on the 50% that do want the factual news, the proof, the everything else that we've mentioned prior. The
Mhm.
next 50%, that's going to be the difficult part. Like, I kind of take it almost as how you do weight loss, right? You could lose 100 pounds really quick, but those last 10 pounds out of that 100 is always the hardest, right? But you can do
Yeah.
it. It's not impossible. It never is, right? It's just a restructure, right? So eventually we'll be able to put so much pressure on these news media houses that it will force them to actually transform the way that they communicate and put out stories. So naturally, people are going to have smaller and smaller things out there, but all of those things can actually help with all of these issues that we do see. In terms of like some people that who cares, honestly, then that's not our problem. That's not the platform for you, you know. But in terms of people that do care, I think that showing the proof is actually going to be way more extreme and cleaner, that it's going to be so shocking when we do reveal all of this information that people are actually just going to be so stunned that they are going to be like, wow, I actually do see the proof. I see what's underneath the web. People in systems engineering actually do get to see a lot of these really crazy things that is not exposed to the public. And when you do release that, it actually shows a lot of clarification to some of the things and helps put that light bulb into those things, you know? For one of our questions, if the politician has said something in a rally, how is the AI going to track it? It's going to track it on news media and all of the activity around it. So there's a couple of portions here. It's going to know, like, it's going to be creating a timeline, right? And this timeline actually shows the first time any one of these statements. We're going to be using heavy natural language processing as well to understand the patterns of these statements, like I love you too, derivations, right, of that particular person, right? Once it hits the media, it actually will show that pattern over time. So the way that the media currently works, right? Journalists are usually looking at these smaller blogs for juicy headlines. They don't fact check them. They don't even have time because they're more worried about all of these things out there, right? And then on the other hand, they're a part of these larger companies that even if it is an honest story, sometimes it's not going to get the larger views, and that's why it's not ever published. But if a politician has said something, we already have data points and things that are tracking it. The AI will actually show, hey, this came from the politician. But another half of it is that people will be working with this AI. So if we're actually at a rally, right? People can upload. Anyone that's on the Etha app will eventually be able to upload end-to-end videos. And this would be like, let's say there's thousands of people that attended this rally and posted that same video. It is real proof that this actually did occur across 1,000 people's phones and that this event does exist. And that way we can track all of the different snippets of audio, video, and text across the media through web scraping in order to get this accomplished and track the narratives, track the exaggeration, track the origination source of this current event, right? Those are all of the different types of techniques and things that we will be using, but it is very easy to actually do that. It's very hard to organize it. So I hope that answered the question for one of our audience members.
I hope so too, and it's great that we have a couple of people, like several people talking here, so that's
Yeah.
part of this show. Shanae, do you have any other question?
Yes, I do. So, in the beginning, you said that once all of the information gets revealed, the politicians will be held accountable. What is the process of being held accountable, and how are you guys going to facilitate that?
Yeah, that's a very big, difficult piece. I would say that this is one of the hardest parts that is going to help with. But a big piece is being able to show the report cards, right? If these politicians are promising something and they do not happen to do what they said that they do, their score will rank. It will go very far down Similarly, if they do promise something, it'll go very high up. This will put a lot of pressure on them to campaign and promise correctly into the public. Otherwise, all of these politicians are going to have zero scores, and no one's going to trust them or reelect them to begin with. This is a natural way of being able to hold them accountable. Eventually, it'll go into like law and policy making for these issues. Like if a politician does something bad, these are the repercussions of it. But on a social scale, this would also be extremely powerful because there's going to be a lot of power, like pressure on these politicians. And I know a lot of countries and governments are not going to be happy with that, but that also exposes a lot of that corruption that we all face.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yes, and I also see a really great comment here, and I'm going to just read it out loud. It says, on the point of verifying the genesis or truth of information, will the platform present it as is, or can it shed light on the nuance or context of info and statements? The answer is it will do both. We are very early stage. I want to make that very clear. But eventually, yes, this is the whole point of what it will do. It will show, hey, this is getting too exaggerated of a story. Maybe you shouldn't read this. This came from some 4 a.m. prankster blogger. You shouldn't read this. Then it also tells you more into the story. Right now, we only have snippets of text, and I know it doesn't make a lot of sense on the platform yet, but it's training our AI, and that's what's taking a little bit of time. Eventually, it will have the full context. So ex-president said blah, 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 but in relation to this. Then it will also have the original article. Let's say if we're talking about an infrastructure bill, it will break down that entire infrastructure bill by subject matter experts that understand that space the most into 4 or 5 points on both the Democratic, the Republican, and a centrist angle. So people are actually going to have to read all of those portions, the shortened version, to understand a little bit better of the context of that story before they actually comment. They'll actually know a lot more about what the whole statement had said versus just that statement and those clicks. I know it doesn't reflect that in the app yet, but we are working on it. But it will also have a timestamp on that time that it was said, that it was mentioned by who and where and when. All of these different things are going to be occurring. And that's the important thing that we need a lot of help with, especially from our users, is getting as much feedback as humanly possible to understand what they'd like to see in terms of context. What additional features would make this stick to it to make sense, so people can wrap their head around the whole entire subject or whatever is being discussed. What we're trying to do is not have everyone fight in the comments section, but to fight about what's being said, right? What our leaders are saying and how to change through a collective of people in order to bring it up all the way to the politician where they could even understand the context of how to solve some of those policies or lives. And then another half of it, will it be down to the user to determine that from the source material? Probably about 20%. I would say people get to vote on like what's the most constructive versus the most deconstructive comment. Plus, we'll be using AI and natural language processing. You know, you're not going to get dinged if you start cursing all over the place. That's totally okay. That's a normal part of language. But when it comes to like F this, F that person, and you're not being constructive at all, and you're just being like, I hate these people, I hate these groups of people, like you're not going to score really well, and you're not going to have a lot of interaction, and all of your comments are going to float to the bottom, so no one's even going to have time to read whatever you're talking about. People will be focusing on the most constructive comments, and those comments, even the good, bad, and ugly, will actually be all put on a spreadsheet and a dashboard to these politicians, so they could say, hey, all these deconstructive people are saying all of these things. Let's hear a little bit more about their perception. And it'll be boiled down into a very condensed format where it collects the average of what people and users are saying. But similarly, on the constructive side, that's also what will occur. People will get to see how popular something is in terms of constructivity, or like, let's say gun laws for right now. It's a very big paradox, right? A lot of issues with gun laws, a lot of things to understand, a lot of regions and a lot of different types of people. This thing will be able to say people in Alabama feel X this way about guns versus people in Brooklyn about this versus people that have been affected by school shootings and this. And it'll actually show down to the percentage of how much people will eventually want to see and be a part of this system in order to do better constructivity to actually solve problems to get things done. If politicians don't take it in their own hands, I definitely know communities will, because they'll
Yeah.
get the best ideas anyway and implement it themselves. At that
Mhm.
point, like if you want to get away from corruption and you don't think our politicians are doing anything, take it in your own hands to go solve it. Similarly, if you think your politicians are doing a good job, just having a hard time understanding all of us, this is something that I'd say, like, this is a huge issue that we'll be solving, is being able to directly bridge the gap of communication, one in the media, misinformation, all that stuff, but also a direct bridge from person, the general public, to the politician so that they could clearly understand one another while we sift through all of this madness, right? So it's all about the way that the architecture is implemented in order for it to correctly synthesize and collect this data, which you honestly can't blame Facebook or any of these news media houses decades ago. They were solving a different problem. Facebook was solving to connect the world, right? They didn't know misinformation was going to be this insane. They didn't know the impacts, right? Every action has a reaction, right? Similarly to like all the other impacts that this thing can bring, is that it'll just be able to be very concise because we are re-architecturing the way that the web and conversations are made in general. Think of it, for all the Elon nerds out there, think of it as like the Starlink around the world, but it's going to be a Starlink around the web, right? An extra layer of whatever it is that we're building.
So the program is already at the end, and thank you for everyone that has been writing and giving their comments and questions. And thank you, Nicole, really for being here with us. One last quick question, and I want a quick answer because we are already out of time. But in regards of, I know that you are at the beginning of this startup, but you are also starting to get noticed, and you are starting to talk with some big people, if we can say it like that. So what do you need to accelerate this? What are you looking for to accelerate all this process?
Yep, what I'm looking for is as many people, as many eyes as possible on this platform. We are literally creating this for the general public, and we need as much feedback as possible. I don't care if you say that you hate our app, show us how we can make it better, and we'll do it live on a call with you. I am that serious about changing this and making this platform come to a realization, because every user, every perception, everything counts when it comes to creating an architecture like this, a company like this, right? So I'd say anyone that is listening, either you as well, Alejandro and Shanae, please share this with your communities and your networks and get the awareness out there, just so we can really start fixing things, because we are all truly bleeding right now. Anything really helps in
Yeah.
that nature. If anyone knows podcasters, politicians, any one of these people, bring them our way. We'll also include you, of course, in order to really make some change and happen. So I'd be really sure, anyone that is open to having a conversation, tell us what you love, tell us what you hate. We love the more hateful comments because it's more real right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Wow.
you very much, and thank you everyone for being here. Nicole, you have a big dream, and this is amazing. I know that there is a lot of people. You have already a good team that has to grow more, of course, because that's part of doing something as amazing as this one. So let's have another conversation here maybe in the near future and continue talking about this. Thank you for this presentation, and everybody that was talking with us today. This show can also be heard on the Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out spanglishworld.ca for all the news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and leave it. Thank you very much to all, and thank you, Nicole. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one. Bye.
Thanks, you too. Bye bye.
Oh, it seems we have a couple of more minutes.
It's fine. Um, Vedanshu, if you're still online, please send me a LinkedIn message, and I'll connect with you. I could definitely brief you on our business model, and definitely talk a little bit more with you. If that's the case, I'll also try to find you on LinkedIn to connect with you further. But other than that, Alejandro, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Very happy to jump on and share more anytime.
Yeah, it was great. Really, I enjoyed.
All right. See you later. Do you want me to stay on the call or?
It's this is because our friend is not here, production. But let me check.
Okay. How do we see if I have?
Okay, let's close it. Thank you all.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.
Bye, Alejandro.